Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 61 of the Pika Serenity podcast. Today, I am joined by my co host, as always, Anomoly.
Hello.
And we are doing today's episode at a little bit of an awkward time. We're recording this
Very.
on a Wednesday at 9 o'clock, which means, of course, a lot of people are raiding, but also, obviously, not our usual time. we
Yeah.
uh we have a little scheduling snafu on the weekend, so we won't be doing a regular episode this week. But we didn't want to miss an episode,
Never.
so the solution was Wednesday night.
Yeah. Basically, I will take the fault for the scheduling issue. I had forgotten that I have family in town, and my office turns into a bedroom when that happens. So a little difficult to do a podcast when you have a baby sleeping right behind you. My family and my family would be pretty upset if I had to pull that out. So sorry for the scheduling and Emallson, as always. Thanks for being so accommodating with my crazy hectic schedule. I'll say. Um, but cool. I think I guess it's funny, like, since you haven't rated yet, normally it'd be like, how'd your
We
sire
had another
progression go?
raid. We had another raid
Oh, you
night
did.
because we
You had
raid
a
on
Sunday.
Sundays, and our last
Yeah,
episode was on Saturday.
that's
So
true. So
we
how,
had a
how
raid
did how
night.
did how did Sunday go then? How did Sunday go
Uh,
before we
we're
get into
getting
what
we're
happened
getting
last
into
week?
P3. We're getting into P3 pretty
Oh, nice.
consistently. It took a little bit for us to like get to the point we were actually able to survive the first few soaks in phase three.
Hmm.
Um, because it turns out, not super surprising, but just getting to phase three is not exactly the hardest part. Getting to phase three with everybody alive and your battle res is available,
Oh yeah.
pushing based off of damage instead of just letting the timer happen is a little bit more involved. But we started getting there. At the end of the night, we were consistently pushing the boss. It might have been at 40.5% instead of literally 40%. Uh,
Mhm.
so the way the phase two push works, for those that aren't familiar, you either push after, I think, 3.5 minutes,
Yep.
or when the boss hits 40%. Since the last phase is a DPS check, you want to push based on that 40% timer instead of based on, or the 40% threshold instead of the 3 minutes and 30 seconds timer. So that you
Yeah.
just have less damage that you have to do in phase three. But we started getting there. It's going well. I'm excited. I
Nice.
think we're going to kill it this weekend. If we keep playing like we were on Sunday, kill will definitely happen this weekend. Possibly Friday. Definitely by Sunday.
Awesome. Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, it seemed like a very, very fun fight. And yeah, that phase three movement
A little bit
is fun.
hectic.
It's fun.
Also,
It's a lot, yeah.
having now spent more time in phase three, holy crap, the boss absolutely beats the tanks in.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Like
the
the
healing there is crazy. It's crazy.
the okay, so I'm a brewmaster, right? So like lol stagger, okay, and auto attacks, whatever, right? I got two shot by auto attack.
Yeah. It's not fun, that fight. And there's some that the two overlaps are just absolutely horrendous. The massacre with Soak overlap, like the first real bad one, is just
Yeah,
like, even watching it being done, I'm like, I don't know how people live through that. So
yeah, yeah. That's the
that'll
point
be
we were getting to. The first massacre. It goes like bait, massacre, soak, massacre,
yeah,
and soak are like overlap, and it's wild.
yeah, yeah,
It's a very cool fight. I'm
yeah.
enjoying it.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. That's fun. That's fun. Yeah, we had our reclear last night. So since we had killed Sire last week, we did our reclear last night, and it was not bad. It's funny. You we ended up killing, essentially almost one-shotting pretty much every boss except for Sludgefist, uh, which I thought was hilarious. But yeah, we had a little bit of trouble with Sludgefist. I don't think the Sludgefist changes, which we'll talk about because they did make them. I don't know if they end up really making the fight any easier in terms of like the DPS and HPS checks. What they kind of do is just lessen your wipes to like the pillar charges, giving you a little bit more time in between those type of things. So, but other than that, I mean, it went well. I got my first Dark Vein kill on last night, which after weeks and weeks of progressing, finally got into Darkvein, which was fun. That fight, I can imagine on progression was not too much fun to do. Pretty
It's
tight.
actually not that bad. Um,
Okay.
like we killed it in 25 pulls. Or the other team in our guild killed it in like 15 pulls. And it's basically just do the soaks, kill the ads, or do the soaks, kick the ads, and focus the boss. And it actually dies with the level here that like we had when we
Yeah,
reached
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Like doing it if you're limit, obviously a little bit harder, but I think they killed it in like one pull or pulls.
Yeah, it didn't seem that bad. It was just I was very nervous about the soaks
Oh
because
yeah,
I
yeah.
or
The
like the
soaks will kill
lines or
you.
whatever. Yeah. So like that was the thing I was super worried about. I actually got it the first pull, like the first one, the first pull, and didn't know what to do.
Yeah,
Because full disclosure, like I don't remember getting it on heroic when we did it, but I didn't realize if you got targeted, you got knocked back, like backwards.
yeah,
So I got knocked to the opposite side of the boss, had to horse through. Luckily, like the raid was to the side, and I ran like diagonally out. So no one like I didn't hit the raid with the beam, but I was like totally out of position. And then I didn't know where like the little balls were. So I like was totally confused as where to stand. So I think I
I
killed our
uh,
DK.
I
But
did
yeah.
that on, or I did that mechanic for the first time ever actually this weekend because
That's
I've
awesome.
been playing my warlock, been getting that geared up. So I got into a normal run. Actually, no, I got into a heroic run yesterday on my
Hmm.
warlock and got targeted
Nice.
by that for the first time ever. I was like, oh, that's a knockback.
Yeah.
And then I also found out that the beams between the orbs, when you have some anima in the canister, are significantly wider than they appear.
Yeah.
I was standing like the orb spawned. I was standing behind it. I was like, I'm definitely not touching either of those beams. I'm totally fine, and I got one shot because both of the beams ticked on me, and this is a relatively new alt, and it just there you go,
God.
30k damage. Goodbye.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Yeah, but yeah, we had a I think we two shot that boss. We might even one shot it even with my screw up. And then yeah, other than Sludgefist, it was a pretty easy reclear. The Zymox timers didn't really phase us. We just sort of pushed and sort of pushed through, right? Because we haven't killed these bosses in forever. So since a lot
Yeah,
of the health nurse went in, um, and yet even the council fight is a joke now. Like
yeah.
council killing the
That's
ads at the end is like I love it. I'm so excited.
we
Don't you worry about
killed.
kiting.
So we killed the first ad on our progression kill. Um, how are you just killing every ad now? Is that the way to
Yeah,
go? Yeah, you just kill
yeah.
all of them, no
We
kiting
just
at all.
we focus and cleave off the first ad,
And the
get that
second one
down,
dies during the intermission.
and the second one dies when the emission, and then the third one, I think we killed the third one, and then just DPS the boss and didn't really touch the fourth one.
Yeah,
I don't know if we even got a fourth one, but yeah, it was
I think we skipped the fourth one on our prog kill, but it's because we kited the third one. And
gotcha.
if you kill the third one, maybe you get the fourth one, but it doesn't matter because by the time it does anything, boss is dead.
Yeah, yeah. So it's still kind of hectic, but it's nice because like we had been kiting both ads at the start, so it was nice to just be able to like sit there and DPS them and leave the other big ad right in the middle with everything. So it wasn't bad. It was not bad.
So
So
did you guys run into the issue with Sludgefist where the soaks animations were like wrong?
n- no, no. So they had hot fixed that before we had gotten there on Tuesday.
Okay, okay.
Um, but that is a great segue, Emerson, into what happened last week.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I think you were discussing basically an animation mismatch on Sludgefist, which in turn was because they made some actual nerfs to Sludgefist, which you actually, I believe, predicted on
Yeah,
our
I
last episode.
nailed. Okay, so I didn't quite nail it. I like got half of it.
Yeah.
So I had predicted that the only thing I could see them changing on Sledgefist was the amount of time you had to do the soaks, specifically the second soak. So I missed it in a couple ways. First off, they increased the travel time, I think, for both soaks. Actually, I'm
Yep.
not sure. Is it?
It's for both. Yeah. Or no, actually, only for the fractured, which is the
Yeah. Okay, so this is just the second one. They
yeah.
literally almost doubled the time for it, quite a bit. Um, and then they made the animation easier to see when there's other stuff on top of it. I haven't done it yet, so I don't know how much it's improved.
Not much.
Not much. Gotcha.
Yeah. At least
Um,
when we did it. There might be another hot fix coming with the hot fix, but yeah.
yeah. But they also did a couple of other things that are going to make it a little bit more forgiving and a bit more melee friendly. That is that Destructive Stomp is smaller range now,
Yep.
which makes boss positioning easier and also means the melee don't have to go as far, have more space and all that stuff.
Yep.
And then Chain Link has a longer range, which
Yep.
is it looks small. It went from 12 yards to 14 yards, but that does actually make a pretty big difference because it means that it's a lot harder when you're running out of falling debris to accidentally kill your partner and
Right.
yourself,
Yeah.
also your partner.
Yeah. So yeah, with when these nerfs went in, I think when the first sort of guilds got to Sludge Fist, what they noticed is that there's an animation desync. So the animation being played was the old animation, meaning it was at 1.5 seconds for the second set of debris. So it would essentially, like, the animation would end, people would move, but the actual hit or soak hadn't happened yet.
Yeah,
So there was sort of a mismatch in that. I believe they also said there was a mismatch in the stomp too,
yeah.
where stomp was larger
Then
or
the
didn't build the
actual
entire circle.
effect.
Yeah. So yeah, a couple of things that we didn't run into that. The actual like the soak time is noticeably different, and is like, I think it actually might be bad because and the reason I
So
say that is
yeah, I heard
okay.
about this too. I think. Sorry, go ahead.
So the reason I say it might be bad is that your melee, so the melee one, so generally the way that people do it is you'll have two camps. So there's four big boulders you have to soak. So you split up into four camps to soak these four big boulders. Generally you have a tank one, a melee DPS one, and then two range camps that soak the other two, right? And it's fine, like your melee do it, but with the increased travel time, there are certain soak positions where the melee are out of range of the boss to
Right.
do the soak. So like you lose an additional second. Really, it's a second and a half longer to do the soak, but technically you're losing probably 3 or 4 seconds in terms of like getting out there, standing still for the soak, and then getting back in. So I don't know if it's better, but like our
Right.
stomp damage was I felt our stomp, like our damage during like the pillars was just lower for whatever reason last
I
night.
think that that is made up partially by gear at this point. It's also made
Yeah.
up for if you have a holy paladin, just make them always do the far soak. The increased range on chain link makes that
Yeah, it's true.
easier, um, and that helps. Um, but yeah, I definitely heard the same critique of it from other people that because of the increased travel time, you could end up in situations where like Sludge Fist goes partly through the pillar, and the soaks are both just out of range of it. So no matter whether you have the Holy Paladin do the far one or not,
Right,
they still
yeah.
can't. The melee still can't hit it, and that's unfortunate. But I think on the whole, it's actually going to.
Yeah, I mean, like, and we had looked back, or I'd looked back through some of our wipes. I think it was something like 50% of our wipes on Sludgefist were to missing soaks.
Yeah,
Like some ridiculous amount of, like, well, maybe not all of our wipes, but like the wipes where we like got one shot or
we
died on the
had a
first
lot of
person.
wipes to missing soaks too.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I think missing soaks on Sludge Fist is like a fact of life if you're not a top 50 killer.
Yeah.
Maybe even if you are a top 50.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know
Exactly.
on anyone.
They were quick. So yeah, so Sludgefist nerfs, and they also, they made some changes to Stone Legion in general. It's like a lot of them, like many of them.
Is this
So
the now the most severely like this might be the most severely nerfed boss in modern WoW.
yeah, I think this is I mean, to read through some of these, right? Like, so volatile stone shells absorb channels increased from to 5 seconds. That's basically when the little lads during the intermission. Isn't that right? They
That's
channel
their
their,
explode, yeah.
yeah, their
So they
explode.
literally made it 25% longer.
Yeah, which is
Yep.
huge.
Which basically means the DPS you need on them to break the shield before they explode is reduced by 25% ish.
Yeah, which it was already not too difficult. So, but yeah, they reduced the damage on Wicked Blast,
Right.
which again, just I think that's the blade, right?
Yeah, so
Um,
Wicked Blast happens it's the thing when it hits you and it's the explosion that happens. And even if you don't cleave anybody, you still get hit by the explosion. It
yeah,
is a good chunk of damage, and this means that maybe you can survive a double. Like maybe you can survive cleaving someone without a cooldown.
Yeah.
Still would not recommend it because Wicked Laceration is also still pretty big. But speaking of Laceration,
That damage was decreased by 10% also, which
wild.
is fun, which is why I mean I think that was a large chunk of damage. Like as soon as
Yeah,
someone got a 2 stack, they basically needed their own babysitter. 3 stack, you had to use externals potentially, right?
yeah.
So yes, that's huge. In terms of just general damage, like Wicked Laceration is a large chunk of the damage you'll take over the course of the fight too. So animal or then another change, animal orbs, their duration was increased to 20 seconds from 15. So you basically get an extra 10 or sorry, 5 seconds to dunk in the intermissions, which is
More than
great.
that, because so that's just the duration of the orbs while they're on the ground. Then they also increase the duration of the debuff when it's on you.
Oh,
So you
sorry, I got the
actually
first
get
part
an
there.
extra 9 seconds.
That's crazy. That's a lot of time.
That's a lot of
Uh,
time.
yeah.
Which like we weren't even like trying not to sub or anything. We just picked them up, and then we did the
Mhm.
thing where you just sit there at the gate and wait for your name to get called and take the gate in and dunk it. Um,
Right.
but yeah, it's kind of wild. And then kind of paired with that is the reduction in the range of
Of the
the
damage.
knockback that goes off.
Yeah.
And
So now if 5 extra or well, it's 5 yards shorter, right? Which
yeah,
I don't know if that's a big-ish deal. Like we
I
were
think
never
it
really
makes
close to
it
that.
I think it makes it a little bit less likely that you just have someone get thrown off by a
Yeah.
dunk while they're trying to soak. That's I
Yeah.
think the main thing that's going to happen is someone's running back from a soak, a dunk happens. It's now a little bit less likely that they get thrown off.
Yeah. So yeah, and then they made a couple of changes to the skirmishers and then the what is it, the Goliath, the big guy. So the big
Yeah,
guy, they reduced his healing reduction now caps at 80%, which was previously 100%. So when you get Goliath's low, it'll slowly stack up a healing reduction. It did stack up to 5 times, which was 100% reduction on healing. Now it is only 80%, which again just
just the
like
so that's actually so much of a bigger change than it reads like. Like it reads like a 20% change. It's so much more than that. And maybe this is just me being a brewmaster, but what would frequently happen during progression is that I would soak or not soak. I would be tanking, and then the Goliath would go into this Sultan effigy, and I would be healing immune, but I would still have stagger from the previous period of time. And even if I purify some of it, between the stagger and maybe still tanking, you know, one of the bosses, it got kind of spooky. And brewmasters don't have anything
yeah.
that can deal with that. Like Celestial Brews and Absorb, our cooldowns actually kind of suck for the fight. We have talents that we could take, except they're all heals. So the 100% healing reduction just meant nothing worked. So if you
Yeah.
went into it, if your DPS pushed a Goliath at a bad time for you, you were pretty screwed.
Yeah. Yeah, and it even hurt if people were like this is the whole double stack of like Wicked Laceration, right? Like a person
Right.
with a double stack here is very much in danger of dying like
We
before you
we
even
definitely
kill
had
the
people
guy.
die with like very little overkill at the tail end of when the Goliath was up. It would
Yeah.
totally live now.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is actually probably the biggest change. I don't know if it makes the fight for healable now. Just because you
Well,
now
there's the four heal speed strat.
yeah, I guess there is that one now. Um,
That's been a thing. That was a thing I know that we someone brought up while we were doing prep, and we were like having random
but I think
timers because of random push timers
yeah.
because of like just variance in people's damage between getting a good combustion off or like getting fewer procs during it. Whatever, I don't know. Mages, hunters, just stuff like that. Doesn't sound like fun. Doesn't
Yeah.
sound like fun at all. Um,
Yeah.
but I definitely expect to see a lot more people.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the final change here is that the Stonegale effigy, which is when the skirmishers get low, they do the push basically. They reduce the
Yeah,
force of that by 20%, which So we actually got to Stone Legion last night, did about 5 or 6 pulls before it was late. We just kind of called it at that point. It's noticeable. Like we had a 3 stack during a meteor and the entire raid was fine sitting inside of it. Like the the pushback is
So,
noticeably less. Like
th-
even with one, it doesn't seem like you move.
like
So
my
it's
question
great.
is, if they're going to nerf it to the point that it's not really doing anything, why don't they just remove the mechanic? Because it's actually really like an obnoxious and annoying mechanic.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're still like you can still get a 3 like, if you push all 3 at the same time, it's still probably an issue with, like, the upheavals, right? Like, I
Yeah,
think there are still it's still strong enough at a 3 stack that, like, you can screw up, but, like, if you do it the way like, there's no chance, like, if you push 1 at a time, like, you will barely notice the pushback
yeah,
now. It was a maybe it's too increased, like, they screwed up the hotfix or something, but like we did a couple and I was like, "What are we even getting pushed back?" Like I was able to simply like walk forward and be fine. Like I have no idea. So,
yeah,
um but yeah, that's a ton of changes to this fight. Like it essentially gives you so much more leeway in terms of like messing things up, right?
yeah,
Like the animal orb stuff is hilarious because like you're right, it's an extra 9 seconds to dunk, which is massive. Um and even individually, like if you pick up every orb, you get an extra 4 seconds, right? Which is still huge.
yeah,
Um the heal now not being 100%, I think is helpful for like where you'll lose a lot of people anyway.
yeah,
Particularly around pushing a Goliath while you're doing the run around in the circle thing, the debris stuff, whatever it's called. Um and then just yeah, general less damage being done coming out with the wicked blades, I think is huge. So yeah, I agree. This is probably the most changed fight over the course of its lifetime, and I, I'm believing this is probably the last set, but I guess we'll see how
I
EJ
don't
does
know
this
what else
week.
they would change without making the like. How would they nerf this boss more without trivializing it? Like, what I would like them to
Yeah.
do is make changes that actually remove the really annoying things, and that would include things like get rid of Stone Gale effigy, just like completely get rid of it. It's not
Yeah.
necessary. Get rid, like, have the timers reset at the beginning of the intermissions as well as the start of new phases, um,
Hmm.
and do something about Mando push timing, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but and that would be my list. But I mean, if you get rid of like Stone Gale effigy and stuff like that, like what's even left in the fight? You do
Nothing. I think.
soaks, you do a dance, you spread for you get the wicked blades out, and then you hold DPS,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I mean,
that's the fight.
yeah. I don't know what. I mean, unless they just give the little lads like the explode from the intermission, and then like that's what they do now, right? Is
That would
like
be
you get them
cool,
low, and
actually. I could
then
get
you have
on
to
board with
focus
that.
them, right? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think this is one of those fights that like I don't think it ever came together, and it's unfortunate that it was the penultimate boss, right?
Yeah,
Like,
like if this were boss number 3 and it didn't really come together, sort of a Blackwater Behemoth kind of thing,
yeah,
nobody would care. Like people didn't like Blackwater Behemoth. I'm
I
guessing they still don't like Blackwater Behemoth,
I love that fight by the way.
but um, nobody really cared because even if your guild was not super good, like high end cutting edge material,
Yeah,
you were still killing that boss in like 10 or 15.
yeah, it was not. I mean, it was not difficult at all. So
Like I think we killed it in 4 or 5, and the 4 or 5 that we failed it was mostly people figuring out the 3D soaks, like what you could and couldn't do while trying to get in the soaks,
yeah,
um,
or forgetting a puffer
or
fish.
forgetting a pufferfish. Yes,
Did that. We lost a couple
yes,
people to early wipes to that. Just like, oh, I didn't remember you get the debuff. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest issue with this one is where it's placed. But also, I don't think it was ever a good fight. Like, I don't think the original
yeah.
iteration of it was good. I don't think when they reworked it after that was good. I don't think this current version of it, because this is like what the third major revision of the fight. Right? We had the original one on beta that we tested. We tested them. We never got to test the mythic version of the fight. That
Yep.
fight. They changed it before mythic testing. We tested the mythic version of it, and then did they change it after that or not? I forget.
I don't even know. I'm pretty sure it was horribly bugged when it was mythic tested.
Yeah, so we don't
which
even know. Yeah.
like I don't. I vaguely remember hearing that it was just unplayable on
Yeah.
beta for the mythic testing. I don't know if that's accurate, but I mean the I mean I'm really glad that they nerfed it again.
Yes.
You know, I actually our the midweek team in my guild just re-killed it not even 15 minutes ago, and
Yeah.
they did the speed strat for it
Oh, really?
for their
Nice.
re-kill because of these nerfs, because they make it much more forgiving in the intermissions.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, so
So
I'll see, like, because we only rated 1 day this week, so we'll see what we do next week. Just sort of take some time off.
yeah,
But yeah, Sludgefist changes ridiculous. Fight's a joke. Probably one of the to be fair, one of the you're right, probably the most changed fight, right, since the start of its like inception, right? And then probably one of the buggiest and just worst implemented. Like I don't know if like even like KJ was this bad, right? The second KJ was this bad
yeah,
what was that instance? I don't know, the Legion one.
Kumas Argeras,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't progress till Jaden. Like I never even killed Mistress, so I don't know
Yeah, I mean,
though.
like most people
I
fought a
don't
very
remember
different.
this many hotfix.
No, and I think the problem, I think the thing there with Kill Jaden at least was a lot of the hot fixes were done like with method and like with the world first racers, right? And less
Right,
about hot fixes seen by the majority of us. So
right.
that might be one thing that hides it, right? But yeah,
And
this
that's
is just
something too. Like I have a bunch of the hotfixes for this boss up on the Prog stats site, and
mhm,
I don't have any of the hotfixes that were made pressing
yeah,
it.
yeah,
There's not notes for that. I don't have anything to go off of unless Max wants to forward me some emails or something.
yeah,
I
exactly.
got nothing.
Exactly. But yeah, more, I mean, I don't know much more to say here, but more sludge fit or more nerfs. So we're up to Sludge Fist and SLG now. I don't think we'll see anything more on Sludge Fist. It's still really tight, which is
Yeah,
cool. It just sort of removes some of the more annoying parts of the fight, and then Stone Legion just seems like they don't know what to do with this thing. So,
yeah. I
um,
mean, I think this is the correct approach. Like, if they don't know what to do with it, and it's clearly not a boss that people like, it's a boss that's killing guilds,
just
then
get it
just make
out of
it a
here.
boss that's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's okay if the difficulty curve like goes up and up and up, and then you get those Sledge Fist, and then like you got the speed
Off a
bump
cliff.
boss of Stone Legion Generals, and you go do an actually fun boss in Cyberdynath.
Exactly, exactly. You get the dip there. So, um, but cool, yeah. So those are some of the at least the Castle Nathria updates this week or changes. We did get some class changes this week, particularly for Windwalkers. They got some updates to their spinning crane kick damage was increased per unique target. So that was one thing. The buff also lasts slightly longer. I know this was so that was one thing they did. They also resolved an issue where spinning crane kick was not gaining benefit from mastery, which we talked about last week.
Yep,
So I think that's in there now. And then their Fists of Fury damage was increased against secondary targets. Um,
that's one that I don't understand that one. Babs Babs might be able to explain it to me, but that one seems a little bit over the top. Given that, so now we're basically back at the point that Windwalker was in pre 9.0.5, and they were very good.
yep.
And the Fist of Fury thing just is like extra on top of it. I'm not entirely sure why that's necessary. Like, sure, I guess it's nice that your 5-second channel ability does more damage in AoE, but it's not going to do
Yep.
anything about people canceling it in single target during Weapons of Order or with legendaries or any of that stuff.
Right.
It's literally just an AoE nerf, and Windwalker was already.
Yeah. Yeah. So now, I mean, I guess they are solidly now what the burst AOE class at this point,
Yeah,
right?
they're unless they get nerfed to going into 9.1, they're going to be one of the best melee in 9.1.
Nice. Look at Windwalkers, man. Give them some love. I'm
Yep.
happy. But
Which
yeah,
means
I think
I am not in monk jail anymore.
nice.
We have our guy, our mage that switched to Windwalker, back to mage, is now back on Windwalker, and there he is going to stay for
Very,
9.1.
Very cool. Very
So
cool.
I can play whatever I want.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and I think they Blizzard posted basically why they made these changes. Essentially, it's because they did a bunch of bug fixes, which lowered the overall damage
Yep.
of not only Windwalker, but I think there was some
Yeah.
Beastmaster changes too, or Hunter changes too.
Beastmastery
So,
changes and marksmanship changes, which I went on a little mini rant last week about people making a lot of noise about marksmanship nerfs or the marksmanship hot fixes,
hmm
and they were fine. They're still fine. And actually, the changes to marksmanship now, I have been told, are meaning that they are looking at swapping covenants. Because the
oh,
marksmanship changes that they got were just increases to their base abilities, not to wild spirits. So that means that other covenant abilities now might get more attractive because they interact with the abilities instead of just
gotcha.
being like broken like wild
Yeah,
spirits.
interesting, interesting. Nice, nice, nice. So, well, that's I mean, yeah. So those are some of the changes from a class perspective. So good, good all around. Good all around on old Blizzrad. Getting this stuff in. So next up this week, kind of I guess we have two more things. One of the, I guess the quick one, and then we have a little longer discussion on the second one here. So bananas, which was a pet, I believe, from the trading card game. It was an exclusive trading card game pet. Is now available for claim in the US and the EU because we have hit, or I say we, but Blizzard hit their charity donation goal. So right now, Blizzard's running a charity donation for Doctors Without Borders. They essentially made two large milestones. It was reaching $500,000 and reaching $1 million donated. We hit $500,000, and with that, everyone who plays World of Warcraft gets a bananas pet. And bananas was, of course, the trading card game exclusive pet, so one of those like loot cards.
Yeah,
Um, so pretty cool. I picked up my bananas today. You do have to go to the store and claim it. It's not like a gift that they automatically send. So if you do
right.
want it, make sure you go to the Blizz store, claim it. It's free. It's cool. If you want to donate, Doctors Without Borders, pretty cool cause. Um, if you want to help them out, there's a bunch of information Blizzard's posts about what they do. Doctors Without Borders have been in some other sort of charity donation things. I know that like Games Done Quick and those sort of like speed running competition things that they do has chosen them as sort of their charity of choice in a couple of them. So yeah, pretty well known. And then I guess if we do reach 1 million donations as a community, we get an all new battle pet, Days of the Sloth, which
All right.
I'm not.
There's one feature that like I I'm pretty medium, let's say, on Daisy the Sloth, except for one
Okay.
element of it that is very unique, and that
Okay.
is that Daisy the Sloth actually rides around on your back.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
No.
yeah, yeah,
What? Wait, I'm watching your stream. What? It's like a little backpack.
yeah.
Okay, I'm
So that's
donating.
like,
That's amazing.
other than that, like, let's be real, I'm not pulling out a battle pet in general anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just not something I do. But the riding around on the back thing is genuinely very cool.
That's so
And
funny.
uh, that's pretty neat.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, cool. Well, cool. Yeah, we got the bananas pet. We get to 1 million. We get Daisy the sloth, and she will ride around on your back.
Hmm?
Like for That's so cool. That's actually super weird. That's awesome though. So cool. So that's good. Charity, always fun, always fun. So the final piece of news for this week is a little thing launched. Blizzard sort of gave a little bit of an announcement about it. Something called the Burning Crusade beta environment, or I guess closed beta, has opened and launched this week. So if you're lucky enough to get in, you now have the chance to relive all of those Burning Crusade memories you have. So, like Emerson, knowing your track record with betas, like, how has it been playing it so far?
It's been real great. People in Guild were linking screenshots of their BNet launcher and the selection of games, and it shows Shadowlands beta. A couple people still have the classic beta on there for whatever
Oh,
reason. Uh, the Burning Crusade beta is of course on there for those people, and then there's me over here. and I linked a screenshot of my launcher, and I'm gonna pull it up right now so people can see what's definitely not on there. I want to figure
All
out.
those betas you have, right? Like you get
Yeah.
into every one of them. You're so lucky, dude.
So check this out. Not a damn thing.
Oh, yikes.
Not a damn thing.
Yikes.
So I do not have beta at this point. I'm suspecting that it's somewhere somehow my account got flagged for something, and I don't know what it is. Then again, this is only the first wave. You know, if I never get Burning Crusade beta, then I'm probably going to be trying to, I don't know, get somebody's attention and
Yeah,
figure
yeah,
out
yeah.
why I don't have beta for anything anymore.
That's hilarious.
Like,
It's funny. So I don't have it either, but
yeah,
I don't know if I'd play it. Like there's
I would. I probably
You
would.
would? See,
Um,
I don't think I would.
and it would probably be just like hopping on for a little bit and like right now you can only go 60 to 64.
Yep.
Um, so it would probably be just hopping on and doing. And I'm still working on my classic character all the way up to almost level 40 now. So I've got 18 more levels
Oh,
to go before the Burning Crusade launches. And I guess if I don't have beta, then
wait,
I can spend the time on that instead.
that's awesome. I've been leveling my shaman too. So I restarted. I hit level 15, but I've been leveling with a controller and like watching Netflix, and it's actually been fun. Like it's weird the way like I use like the console port whatever add-ons do it, and like
Yeah,
they give you a way to set it up. It's actually really easy and really nice.
I
So I
might have to try
recommend.
that actually.
Dude, it's actually so I was super surprised. So I have like just an Xbox controller, right? And
Right.
the way it works is like all of your face buttons and like your little bumpers on the top are buttons, but then the triggers are modifiers. So you have like
Yeah.
all your face buttons and the bumpers, and then you can pull left trigger, all those become modifiers, right trigger, all those become modifiers. Then you can pull both triggers
And you get
and they're
all right.
modifiers. So it's like a billion buttons to press, and it's like
Yeah,
super
that's
easy.
how the Final Fantasy 14 and Final Fantasy 11
Oh, cool.
controls work. Final Fantasy 11 um, was on the PS2, I want to say, as an MMO.
I believe so.
Definitely PS3. I think also PS2 towards the end of its life. Um, but yeah, that's how they work. They use the trigger buttons as modifiers. So you basically have 3 or 4 sets of face buttons.
Oh, yeah. It was really cool. And then they also have they have like if you ever use like the Opie add-on that puts a ring on your screen, they have a button that does that too, like for even more stuff. So there's plenty of like I was worried about key bindings being the major thing,
Yeah,
but it was super easy. And then they set up a really nice interact way to like loot easily with just one button press too.
nice.
So there's a ton of work done on it. I've had a ton of fun, watching Netflix and sort of leveling. So
Yep, I mean that's what I was doing, leveling my druid, just watching Netflix, keyboard and mouse instead of a controller.
you can't, you
But
can't, you can't like you can't be like all the way back here.
I don't know, dude.
I guess you can get pretty deep. You have pretty long arms. I have like little baby Tyrannosaurus
Okay.
Rex arms. So
I also I can pull my keyboard all the way out to the edge of my desk, and it's
oh
fine. It's
nice.
fine.
Just get real lounged in there. I love it. I love it. But cool, yeah. So TBC beta launched. If you got it, good luck, have fun. If you don't have it, I mean, like you've already played this if you're a real gamer, 15 years ago. So
Yeah.
not too much new. No, I'm just kidding. People are super excited. I mean, it's funny. A lot of toxicity around it. As always, they're like, "Oh, only streamers get this." I'm like, dude, like,
Yeah,
it's a
no,
mark.
multiple people in my guild that do not stream got it. So
Yeah. I
it's
mean, a
not
bunch of
only
people got it.
streamers. A bunch of
Yeah,
streamers did get it, but it's
yeah,
not only streamers.
yeah. So I mean, it's cool. It'll be fun. It makes me super hyped. Which I didn't put this in the news, but sort of hand in hand here, there's a clip of Tally going around. I don't know if you've seen this about 9.1. So about retail
Yeah, I
9.1.
thought about putting it in here, but I wasn't sure because of how speculative it is, I guess.
Yeah. So just I'll say it just based
Yeah,
on
yeah,
it's very speculative and it kind of ties into what my joke that I have for this, but I'll let you know that there's gonna be a joke at the end of this. So yeah, so Tally basically says like he's very well known in the community, very well known at Blizzard too. Honestly, really nice guy. But he was talking to some folks at Blizzard and they were basically saying, hey. or he was saying like, hey, I'm kind of concerned about 9.1 not being on the PTR yet. Maybe a longer term in terms of like not coming out to like June, July timeframe from a launch perspective. And Blizzard, he basically said the people I talked to Blizzard had the same concerns, like, hey, this is going to get delayed or going to be longer, um, which sucks because we all want new content. I think slightly understandable given like the environment, right? Like, I know that COVID's only been a year, but like you can basically say like 9.1 has essentially been fully developed at home, right?
Yeah,
Where like most of what expansion are we in?
Shadowlands.
Shadowlands. I was going to say BFA, but like most of Shadowlands was sort of developed pre-COVID, right? Like they had
Yeah,
launched their alpha right around COVID time, so you could say a lot of it was polishing at that point. So, yeah, it just sucks from the delay perspective. However, it does give us more time to play Burning Crusade, so I'm
that is
kind of
true.
excited about that.
But
Um,
honestly, what beta I could really use right now? Diablo 4.
Diablo 4. There's a new Diablo 3 season. This week, next week, some week.
Yeah, but I've played Diablo. I've played
That's
a bunch.
true.
I might pop it on a little bit, just grab a monk. I actually kind of wish that they would let you start a level 60 in a new season. Because the worst
I
part is always playing through 1 to 60, and it's like it's so fast. You get someone to carry you through it, especially it's like 20 minutes. But if you don't have anybody around that just like wants to carry you through,
so
then
I'll let you know my
bad.
secret is I am always busy the launch night whenever my friends are going real hard. I
Yeah,
have other things to do. I got a family. But I'll show up Saturday morning and be like, if anybody's still up, like, hey guys, you think you can power level me just a little bit? Just I'm just here. You
just a
just
little
power
bit,
level me
just a
just
little
a little
bit.
bit. And that's how I do my leveling. That's how I leveled probably the past like 2 or 3 seasons I've played. Essentially like miss launch night, but then call in a favor or two.
Yeah,
Uh,
all my guildies are on the PoE train, so I don't. I'm sure
that's
there's
true.
like probably a couple that do the D3 seasons, but nobody that really like gets into it that deep.
Yeah.
The Path of Exile new season comes, and unless it
Yeah.
coincides with something else really big, that's what people.
Gotcha. Yeah, we don't have too many people. We have like 1 or 2 people that play PoE, but yeah. So cool. So yeah, so sorry, a little bit of speculative, some rumor based stuff, but it just means you get to play more Burning Crusade, before 9.1. Um, so cool. I think that wraps it up for the week. Unless you have anything else you wanted to cover.
Not like this actually. It was kind of strange. Like I put up the previous episode last night. Actually, it was
Yeah.
it's late, and it was weird uploading it and knowing we had multiple major pieces of news in the time between the
Oh yeah.
episode being, done live on Saturday and the episode getting put up on Pete.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy how much news we actually, because that's what I was worried about doing it so early in the week was like we're gonna run out of news.
Oh
But yeah.
no, we definitely didn't.
No, not at all. Not at all. So cool. So I think now the topic, which I don't think we introduced at the start of the episode, but it's actually my topic.
No.
So yeah, so the topic we were going to talk about today was essentially the idea of being benched, right? Like the idea that, and not being benched from like a really just kind of being benched for a progression fight, right? So understanding from a guild perspective, you're not going to be there for progression, and like what that means, sort of what the mindset is, I think the idea is to approach it from 2 ways, right? Approach it as number one as the player being benched, right? And then I think Emallson being a tank, and they don't generally get benched for anything, and also being an
Pretty
officer in his
much.
guild, sort of approaching it from the standpoint of like what goes into like deciding who is in for what fights, or when a player gets benched versus not, right? Um, so yeah, so I think from my perspective, being a healer, being a mistweaver as a meme, but just in general being a healer, right? There's not a consistent like you have the same number of healers in every fight,
Yeah.
and you only have the number of healers and you're always in, right? There's fluctuations. There are 3 heal fights, 4 heal fights, 5 heal fights, 6 heal fights in Sun King this tier, right? Um, so
It's
yeah, so I
very
think we're
rare to heal fight.
yeah. It's been a while. I guess what was the
The
last
Jara
one?
method to heal. I don't
Yeah,
think anybody else actually to healed that fight except for on farm for.
yeah, no, I think yeah, and then the Elasan was probably the last in Nighthold. Was probably the last like true 2 heal fight. Was it Elasan or was it the Is that the
You're
rune
asking the
boss?
wrong person.
I always forget if Elasan is the second to last boss in Nighthold or the actual
Elisand's
like
Elyson
is she
is the
this
second to last boss. She is the one right before Ben.
gotcha, then it's not that boss. It's whatever boss did the rune things. That was too healed. In any event,
The rune thing?
uh like you got like different things over your head and you had to match with
Star
somebody to
Augur.
get rid of it.
Star Augur.
Star Augur. There we go. Thank you. Um So yeah, so what is sort of like my idea for just a topic in a conversation was like, what is the approach to being sat? So we'll start first, I think, from like the player perspective as the individual being sat, and then like we'll go into like I mentioned, what are the thought process around certain like sitting certain individuals. So as an individual or a raider that has been sat for multiple fights over the the last few tiers, right?
Notably
Um,
sat for Denathrius.
Notably, well, Denathrius was a vacation thing, but I mean,
Oh, okay.
I was sat earlier actually in this tier for a Nerva, for be it for Battle for Dazar'alor, I was sat for the Opulence. For Eternal Palace, it was the chick with the coral. She dropped the coral.
Ashvane.
I don't Ashvane. There's always at least one fight, right? From a healer perspective, that we drop low enough that I'm not in, or it needs something very specific. So that's actually a good point. Is that so yeah? So sorry, I have sort of experience in sitting and riding the bench for riding the pine, as we will.
Yeah, he tried to talk me
Uh,
into naming the episode Riding the Pine, by the way. And
that was
I thought
close.
about it.
That was
I thought
close.
about it, but the level of innuendo that we would be dealing with from the peak Discord would be completely unreal. So that
Yeah.
didn't happen.
That is true. So yeah, so I wanted to basically just talk about like what goes through at least my head and maybe what goes through your head in terms of like being sat and like how you should approach it, right? To not be a toxic thing. Because I think it is a sort of a fact of life or fact of rate, not life, but fact of rating in World of Warcraft. If you don't play some certain classes, you will be sat for progression, right? Regardless of what you do or who you are, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think the biggest thing from my perspective and sort of what I've learned is that you should approach it in that like ultimately this is going to sound kind of corny, but like raiding is a team sport, right? Like you
Yeah.
don't only raid with 20 people. The expectation is that the same 20 people don't show up every night, right? There are people that are going to sit. The team's larger than that, and like the ultimate goal, like as weird as it sounds, like my ultimate goal is never like individual performance or like individual gain. It's like I just want to kill bosses,
Yeah.
right? And like I want to kill bosses with the group of people that I enjoy playing the game with, and whatever needs to happen to get there, I think you end up doing. And I think for me, right, like whenever I am sat, while I hate it initially, right, I think in my own head, I try and basically turn that maybe negative situation to a positive in terms of like maybe why I'm being sat, right? Like a very clear example was being sat on a Nerva this tier. Nerva was a 3 hill fight, and Mistweaver, I was still playing Mistweaver at the time. Mistweaver wasn't just they just weren't strong. We had a strong shaman, we have a strong disc priest, and we had a strong holy paladin at the time. So it's like while I don't know if I'm markedly better than any three of those players, I'm at their level. But I play a class that isn't, right? Like, and so in terms of like sitting there was sort of going into the tier and looking at the bosses, like I sort of circled that one as like this is gonna be my one fight this tier I don't kill until the last boss dies, right? Which happened with Opulence and Ashvane, right? I think I killed Ashvane for the first time like the week before the next patch hit. Right, like in one of our final raid nets, I was like, "Hey, can I just kill Ashtrain this week so I have like all the achievements and then we're good?"
Yep.
Um,
I am still my monk is still missing the kill on Opulent. Actually, I think it has it now from sales, but
gotcha.
I didn't get it until in the palace because I played I wasn't set on it. I played my paladin.
Yeah,
Just like I never wanted to switch off with the paladin because I was scared that like losing the buff would make us just not kill the
yeah.
boss.
Excuse me.
We
Yeah,
were getting
yeah, and to be fair, like it's funny as from a mindset perspective. Once you're sat and you miss progression, like I don't mind sitting for the boss at all. Like unless the like loot wise doesn't even matter to me. Like I'm like I just want our re-clears to be faster so we get to the
yeah.
actual hard fights, right? So it's like I don't want to change anything. So that's the biggest thing I think is like from a mindset perspective is understand that like you might sit for this fight because your class or whatever you do, you don't like it might be a performance issue, which we'll keep it positive, right?
Yeah.
We'll say maybe your class doesn't function well, or you just have other players right around you that their classes sort of fit what you're trying to do better. Like I know that Melee ran into a huge issue in old deer, right?
Yep.
With like Mithrax, right? We ran very few Melee on Mithrax. We had to bring in, we actually recruited some ranged for that fight, just because Melee was so bad in the original iteration of it. Um, so yeah, so I think it's in terms of things like that. There's always that, hey, this sucks, but the idea is like you'll be there for the next fight, you'll be in next, right? At least the way that my guild runs is like we sort of try and balance from a progression
Yeah.
perspective, like getting people in. If you're going to sit for a bunch of a boss, a very long boss, right, making sure you're in for the next one, um, and things like that. So I think that's the biggest thing is from a thought process perspective is like don't treat one boss as like, hey, this is awful. Like don't go in with the expectation you're always going to be in. But
Yeah.
understand there's going to be puts and takes like on a team like this. So
Yeah. I
uh,
think there's a couple of things that I think are really important. One of them is it's really helpful if you take a long view, like you were alluding to. It's not about this boss, or even really too much about this tier. Um, because if you're rating is also, in addition to being a team sport, it's a long term thing.
yep.
You're playing, well, ideally you're playing with a group for an extended period of time. Multiple tiers, and being sat for one boss this tier doesn't actually mean a lot in, like, being
No.
out for one or two bosses in Castle Nathria has no bearing on whatever they're calling the next. I actually don't know.
Yeah, I don't forget either. I know what you mean.
Um, so it does help to not focus on, like, the the immediate. Be watching all of your friends be in on a boss that looks like a lot of fun, and you want to be in on, not not the best feeling in the world. At the same time, sometimes you get benched for Stone Legion generals, and you, like, sing all the way to the bench.
Yeah.
We had we had so we were doing some swaps, bringing some different people in on the fight, and we benched. We have two boomkin, and we ended up benching one of them for Stone Legion generals. And part of it was because he specifically asked to, because he was like, "I hate this boss. Get me out of here. Do not make me progress this boss."
Yeah.
And, like, I mean, when someone offers to be benched as an officer, that's really nice because I know they're not going to complain about it after.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. You're right. Is it a lot of people? I don't know if a lot of people don't view the game this way, right? But I view the game as like I want to raid with people I enjoy raiding, playing games with, right? Like I don't like to me if I was maybe if I was younger or like in a different mindset, like I'd want to chase rankings, which I think is a different mindset, right? But for me,
Yeah,
like I don't want to feel like my time is being wasted, which is like the biggest thing. And then I want to play games with people I enjoy playing them with. So
yeah,
to your point, like the long term aspect of it is like, yeah, you have to look at it as more of a, hey, I'm going to sit for one boss, be in for the next one. And I still think I can, I still think I can contribute, right? Even though I am on the bench, right? And I think that's maybe the second aspect of this is like a lot of times if you are benched, you can still help out. Like maybe
yep,
not as much as if you were in the fight, but there are like other things you can do, particularly around like, sometimes log reviews. Like I know from a healing perspective, there are certain times where like I will interject and be like, hey, we should move something here. Watching a stream, I'm like, it looks like we might need something here.
yeah.
Or it's like,
We
hey,
we
don't move
had
anything.
someone doing exactly that during our Stone Legion. Actually, the boomkin that we benched, helping out with log stuff while we were progressing Stone Legion, and he did it while we were experimenting with different comps on Nathrius, and he ended up, like, he's in our Denathrius kill comp. But while he
Mhm.
was out, he was sitting there looking at logs, being like, "Hey, this looks like it is a problem. What about this?" You know,
Right.
it's
Which
it's
I, which
actually
I
super helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's a good way to view fights, right? That you're not in on is that there's still something you can stay engaged with. 'Cause I think that's the other, maybe the thing that maybe turns a lot of people off is like if you're not in the fight, you kind of maybe feel like you can't do anything to contribute to it. But I think there is
Yeah.
still stuff you can do like outside of it. I mean, and to your point, it's like maybe it's log reviews, maybe it's like, hey, I watched this other guild just kill it. They made this adjustment,
Yep.
make some strat like inputs there. Like healing cooldowns, which is where I spend a lot of my time anyway, is like a very helpful in terms of like, hey, does it make sense to move something here versus there? Or do we just need to see this part of the fight again? We don't need to move a cooldown. So yeah, so I think that's like the biggest thing is like it's got to be a mindset thing with you, in that it's not a short term thing. You're not being sat because you're bad. Like you're not being sat because the guild hates you, right?
Yeah.
Like and maybe in a small sort of cases that is the issue, which you probably should look for a new guild anyway. But if you like the people and they, seem to like you, like I think the idea is you end up being sad as just sort of a way that this like just something that happens in the game, and
Yeah.
it should never be negative, right? Um, which I think that aspect of it really falls outside of you sometimes, and on like your raid team, like your raid leaders or your officer core, in terms of like discussing like why they're sitting you, right?
Yeah.
Like I think the
That's actually a big thing is, and this is something that we haven't always done the best of on my raid team, but people take it a lot better if you can tell them we are sending you for this reason. You are out because we had, even if it's just we had to sit ADPS and you were in for the previous three bosses and this person that we're bringing in was out for two of them. Like
yeah,
that's legit.
r-
So sometimes
right,
that's how it goes too. Is it's just trying to make sure that especially on the earlier bosses where it doesn't really matter what you bring, like it at least as far as DPS goes. Um, Sometimes it does just come down to trying to make sure people actually get to raid.
right. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean I think that's the thing, is that there's always a balance there, right? Too. In terms of like you might need a specific number of classes, so that means like, hey, we need 300s for this.
Yeah.
So the 300s we have are in no matter what.
Yep.
But
Nizalth
the
was really
next
bad
fight,
about that with what 6 immunes required.
yeah, so the immune, so that's, I mean, that was literally, we had to sit, I think probably our best DPS player, one of our best DPS players, because they didn't play Boomkin. What was good? They played some melee class. In any event,
Melee class,
um
but it didn't have an
yeah, so like the problem there is that like they just had to sit because we didn't have enough other classes to cover minis with them in the raid.
yep.
So um
We
yeah, comp issues are, those are the worst ones. Actually,
those
to
are
be fair,
those are the ones that
like
people I think hate the most. And in
yeah,
Nizalth's case, at least, it was fairly cut and dried. It was like there is no way for us to do this without the immunity. We need 6 immunities, and if we don't have 6 immunities, we need for everybody to play at the level. Basically, we throw away one or two of our B reses every single pull. Just
yeah,
basically having a person that's not immune do the soak and die.
yeah,
And that's the kind of thing where like people are very receptive to that. I would say it gets a lot muddier when you're like, well, it's very clear, say that Resto Shaman better than this fight, so
yeah.
we're bringing two Resto. Um, that's where things start to get dicier because everybody wants to defend their class and be like, look, I can keep up. I can do this. I might not be playing the meta spec, but I'm a good player and I can do this. And like, it's a like you said, it's a
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah,
It's
it's I think though, yeah, like the class ones I think are were, at least as a Mistweaver, are the toughest ones to take, right? Because I like I'm a
Mistweaver's a
very,
great
at least
example.
personally, I'm a very logical person. I'm like, yeah, no, Hungering Destroyer, it makes sense to have two Spirit Links. Like
Yeah,
that it basically negates the intermission. You can ignore consume. Like that part of the fight does not matter, and you need two of them to cover every one of them. Of course, you bring two,
yeah. And then of
two
course you bring a Disc Priest because Spirit Shell does
yeah, because
really
then you
silly
have
things on that fight. And
a bunch of absorbs.
if you're really stacked, you bring two Disc Priests, and there's actually just nothing else to do with your healing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean that's, I think from a healing perspective, it's somewhat of that, those are more difficult situations to talk about. Just because I mean, you at that point you're being sat, like it's difficult to say, to know if you're being sat from a skill perspective or just from a like my class sucks perspective. And then you're like, shit, if my class sucks for hungering the second boss in the raid or third boss in the raid, I'm screwed for sire. You know what I mean?
And I mean
But
that's not always the case, right? Because we
yeah,
have
that's true.
the
That's fair.
converse where this happens pretty regularly in tank discords. People go, "Oh my god, look at this really dumb thing that I don't know Prop Paladin can do on this boss," and it's like yeah, that's great. That's super cool. Nobody cares that they can choose the third boss in the raid.
Yeah.
So something like prop paladins being able to bop almost every mechanic in the first half of Battle of the Zarlor, being able to solo tank Bwan Samdi during the Rastakhan fight, like nobody
Yeah.
cared. And stuff like Kael'thas this year, they can do some really dumb healing on Kael'thas, and it doesn't matter because
Yeah.
they still just die on side.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that from like a that those are sort of some of the tougher conversations to swallow, but I mean, I guess the question to you as like an officer, do you have any sort of like ranking in terms of like how you look at a fight and setting a comp? Like is it
So I am an officer. I have not been super involved in setting comps. I have
gotcha.
to deal with a lot of the blowback when people are not happy that they're being sat though. So I have a very weird situation where I'm like not the one making the decisions about who's getting sat, but I am the one that's dealing with the consequences of sat.
Gotcha.
Uh, which our previous raid leader was not always very good about communicating why people were in versus out, and
Mhm.
you know some of that translated into me just having to ask him, and sometimes there were good reasons, and sometimes it was just like I have to pick 20 people, right?
Yeah.
And that's it sucks, but that's the reality of it. And that actually extends way beyond rating. Like there's a bunch of things like if you ever went for a competitive scholarship or something while you're in school, there's a limited number of slots.
Yeah.
There's more people that are deserving of it than there are slots. Some of those deserving people are not going to get it,
Yeah.
and it sucks. And that's really unfortunate and just how it goes. But
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes it is just we needed to pick 20 people, and there are no clear tiebreakers. Um, but a lot of the time, I would say at the level that we rate at, um, outside of healers, healers are different because healing cooldowns are such a big part of spec identity for healers. Um, for DPS though, spec almost never comes in. Like there's
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of, oh, we need this immune here, or Wild Spirits is really silly on Stone Legion Generals, or on Izoth, mages were the best thing in the world because Ignite was disgusting, and they also had immunities. So there are cases that we do look at it, but for DPS, it's almost never look. Like we're never going in and looking at, okay, well, if you look at the Blood Mallet rankings, or if you look at the
Yeah.
Warcraft logs percentile, then Marksmanship Hunter is 5% worse than Fire Mage, Warlock, or whatever, Boomkin.
Yeah.
And therefore we're sitting you for a second Moonkin. Like that's never happening. Um, we do look at things like how people actually do as far as damage goes,
Yeah.
and survivability over the course of a tier is another big one. Like people
That's
with worse damage but better survivability kill bosses faster. At least, and this is again maybe not true at the world top 50 or top 10 or whatever level where they're beating the bosses with I level 215 this tier or whatever.
yeah.
Um, but it is true when we're reaching an end boss, and like I'm 225 on. I am actually almost. Uh, there is very little that I can get from the rest. So Legion. It would even be in. So it's like we have the damage, we have the gear. It's really about living through the fight and executing. So that's actually probably the number one biggest thing that we get is mechanics,
Yeah.
mechanics, mechanics. Can you live? Can you take the things to the right locations? Can you reliably soak and interrupt? That is the number one thing.
Yeah. And that's basically ours too, right? Like I don't set comps either, but knowing who's in and who's not in, at least like just seeing the comps is like there's definitely a like if you do your mechanics, you generally are going to be in for the progression polls. At least, to
Yeah.
your point, like at our level, right? That's not any different. I think that's the biggest thing. I think we rarely there are certain cases where we'll do it based on loot, but I
Yeah,
mean,
that happens a lot
we,
more for us earlier in the tier. Like we have a loot sheet that people put their loot needs. And
mhm,
so on the early bosses, especially where comps are super flexible, um, it's a lot more about okay, your best trinket drops for this boss. We're gonna try and make sure you're always in for it. Get that.
yeah,
And so then we do try and get people their loot, and if somebody goes nuts and puts bis on every boss, like we're gonna talk to them.
yeah,
That's not
exactly,
how that works. That's not how
yeah,
anything works. But that is something as well. But once you get to like the last three bosses, loot matters a lot less because, well, at least for us, because we're a 2 night guild, so around the last three bosses is generally where we start extending,
yeah,
and that means that we're not going to be getting any more loot, and we're only going to get one set of loot off of Sludge Fist, one set of loot off of Stone Legion Generals, and then when we kill the Nathrius, we'll get that loot, and we'll look for the raid, and we'll go back and start. But the loot doesn't matter very much for those two. Is the odds of you, especially in Shadowlands, the odds of you
yeah,
getting the best loot off of Sludge Fist is really low. So like Sludge Fist drops an extremely good melee trinket. We didn't bring extra melee to try and get that trinket on more people. Like,
no,
no, that's
just want to
not
kill that boss.
happening.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I think that's yeah, that we're very similar, like in a very similar situation in terms of the way our comps work too. Is that like we loot needs are sort of that thing that we care about, sort of the early bosses we do reclaim, but as soon as we start extending, it's literally who makes the least amount of mistakes, and who can be like if needed, who can rely on to do a specific mechanic or do something very targeted, right, based on your class. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing that happens from like a sit from a progression perspective, right? To your point, outside of healers, is that it's just like consistency, right?
yeah,
It's like not dying to the heroic mechanics, like we used to call them. Like
yeah.
this is a heroic
We call them the
mechanic.
same thing. We call them the
Don't
same
die
thing.
to it. Yeah,
And probably the worst thing you can do is um like forget the heroic mechanics,
yeah,
especially on one of these last couple bosses where like because heroic loot was so lackluster, we like stopped doing way earlier.
yeah,
Like we were heroic farming Nyalotha all the way until we killed Nizov, and
yeah.
doing it with alts well beyond that because corruption. Like you
Oh
just
yeah, there's
wanted
always
more
that
shots
choice.
at loot. But with how bad the loot is, heroic.
That's-
Like once you and I don't mind this again. I actually think this is actually pretty good. I think this is a good outcome of the way they did
Yep.
loot in Shadowlands. We don't farm heroic anymore. The loot's not relevant to us, and that's fine. But it does mean that you might be a little bit rusty on the fight mechanics. So
Right. Yeah.
if you start Stone Legion Generals or Denathrius, like if you go into Denathrius and forget one of the fight mechanics, forget about Crescendo, and you're like die to it. At least that's
Yeah.
something that's like fairly obvious, but I can't think of a good example off the top of my head. But you forget some mechanic. Um, I
It's
mean,
bad.
the only thing worse than being inconsistent is being unprepared.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say that like that's probably my guild's one of my guild's weakest things is that I feel like a lot of our raiders don't do the whole even just watch a video thing. It's like they go in and they're like, all right, let's learn it live, and it sort of
We have a
causes
few
some
people that
issues.
do that. We
Yeah,
are very, uh, we are a lot more active prep, and it ebbs
yeah,
and flows. Like some bosses we're like super over prepared for, and we get there and it's like, wow, that we didn't need to do that much prep for it. We spent more time
yeah,
preparing for the boss than killing the boss. And then others we
yeah,
get to it and it's like, I wish we had done more prep. We would boss a lot faster. But often, like I would say, almost all of our issues this tier have not been preparation. They've been execution. They've been consistency. Ledgefist took us as
yeah,
long as it did because soaks and dying to chain breaks, and that's just consistent.
yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, because I think that was, yeah, I think for us that was sort of the biggest thing is just like consistency in that regard. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense in terms of when you looking at individuals or when you are being sat, right? I mean, I think the biggest thing is just, have a having a dialogue with your raid leader or just like whoever like sets your comp, right? And being like, look, am I being like, why am I being sat? I think is like the biggest thing to know. And if the answer is anything more than like if they're being like actually like respectful of your time and not like saying like, oh, we just need other people, but like you're never being brought to progression, I think that might be an issue.
Yeah.
Right. If you're always sat for every progression kill, maybe it's maybe
Maybe
it's
it's a problem.
maybe it's a
I
problem. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's them. Right. But that seems like an issue. But I know that at least in like my guild and you're like right around like in terms of like the US top 180 ish guilds. Like I think even at our area, like we at least my raid leads try and be very truthful in terms of why you're sitting. Right.
yeah.
Like me sitting on Ashvane was a very simple thing of like paladins are just better and we have two holy paladins. So and when there's only four heal slots here. So
Yeah.
of course, that's what we're gonna do, right? And then, opulence was the same way in terms of just like I was in for a different boss before that, so I think our druid got the slot there.
Yeah.
So the idea is like as long as you understand why you're sitting, like I think that's the biggest thing, and as long as it's not a like performance issue, right? Like if you're just bad, like that's a bigger issue, right?
Yeah.
Get better. Don't get angry at people for sitting you. It's just like you just need to play better. Um,
And you could go and you could look through our logs for our guild and see who basically never gets sat. And there's like three categories of never gets sat, right? There's the tanks, there's the healers especially, but people that are on the like ultra meta thing where it's beyond even being flavor of the month, it's just busted. Something like
yeah,
Disc Priest right now, or Holy Paladin and Fire Mage and Nyalotha, even to a degree, Holy Paladin now is like up there, maybe not Disc Priest.
yeah.
Um, and those people just don't. We have one
Right,
Holy
yeah.
Paladin, we have one Disc Priest. They are in for every boss.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
there's the people that are just extremely consistent. That's the people that are extremely consistent are in for almost every boss because
Yeah.
they're just reliable, and that's what we want.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing. So, but even if you are sat, like I think we mentioned, like it's sort of a short-term thing. You'll miss progression for a boss, right? Depending on what the boss is. Like I missed Denathrius progression this tier. This will have been the first end boss I've missed progression on since probably killed Jaden. So it's been a fair amount of time.
It's a
Um,
while.
Yeah, so it's kind of sucks. In any event,
It
uh,
always does.
yeah, but I mean, my issue was I was on vacation for a week, so like, there's
Yeah,
also expectations around like your personal issues coming into play. Like, if you're gonna miss a night of progression
yeah,
in the middle of progression, like, don't expect to be there. I guess is the other side of
yeah.
things too.
We had that happen with Nazoth. Somebody knew they were going to be missing part of progression, and
Hmm.
it was an extended enough period in the middle of our progression. You're not going to be in our guild.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and that's just progression takes time, and if you're missing part of it, then we don't want to hold the rest of the raid back waiting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the other sort of, I guess, point that I should have made earlier was around just like if you are being sat, like understand the circumstances more around it. Like it could just be like you're not going to be there, you just have something going on, which we never like as a guild, our thing is always like take care of yourself first and then come and play the game. So like
Yes,
we're
same.
very much like if you need to sit, we will figure it out. Like
Yeah,
if you're our only holy paladin on a fight that needs a holy paladin, like we will figure out something to do
yeah,
to get through that, right? But I mean, in terms of just sort of the idea of like being sat during progression, like trying to understand there's probably more that goes into it than just you're bad. And I think the other thing is that because there is a large number of people that play the game with you, like never have the expectation that you're always in,
yeah,
right? And if you do have that expectation, I mean, to your point, Emil said, play a class that is always needed, right? Like
yeah.
play a disc priest if you're a
Figure out
healer.
what the ultra meta thing is and play that.
Yeah,
And if you can't for whatever reason, play a tank.
yeah,
Like if you don't
exactly.
want to get sat, play a tank. I've been sat. I've been on the bench twice since I started mythic rating. The first time was because I was out of town for an interview. on Ilgan. And then so I missed a night to that, and I was planning on
Mhm.
being out because they were really close to a kill. And then the raid leader was like, what are you doing? You're the tank. You're not getting benched," and brought me back in for the kill. And so I had to wait after every, which was like not ideal, but it was not very hard. And then
Yeah.
when I was on my hunter, which is on farm, not on progression, which is a very different thing. The expectations that people have about sitting on farm versus sitting on progression are wildly different.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but I will say, and this is kind of an aside, being in all the time actually kind of sucks.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if eventually you want to be like, okay, they're working on this boss, I'm out for this boss, I can like I'll be around if they need me, but I'm gonna chill out and play Dark Souls or something.
Yeah.
And if you're always in, you can never do that.
Yeah.
And that's not to say like, oh, you should be happy that you're being benched, because being benched still sucks. But it ain't all sunshine and roses. Um
No, no. Yeah,
but
the breaks are nice. This last couple weeks has been nice in
yeah.
terms of not being in for Sire.
I will say probably one of the biggest pieces of drama that has happened around like people getting benched is when people's goals and their understanding of the team and everything are not actually like two different people have different perspectives on what the team is trying to accomplish and what that implications are for who gets sat and who doesn't. Because someone who thinks, oh, the team is going to try and push as fast as possible for a kill on every boss, well, the correct thing to do in that scenario is to bring the top performers always playing, you know, a reasonably meta comp, but at our level, there's flexibility because we can sacrifice the meta ness of the comp to bring better players.
Right.
Um, Whereas someone like Limit is just gonna like they've got all the best players. They play the meta comp and the best players.
Yeah, yeah.
um, versus someone that's like, I'm just here to raid with friends and I care a lot more about the people I'm raiding with than killing the bosses as quickly as possible. Like they probably don't want to like spend an extra 100 pulls on a boss in service of that kind of ideal, but they don't want to always just have all the top performers.
Right, yeah.
And so when those like I've had situations this tier even where I've been getting DMs from two different people, you know, where one person's like, you should have obviously sat this person because they're on one of those ends of the spectrum of like more casual, like play with people I like, versus
Right.
the progression oriented, rankings oriented, kill it as fast as possible. And like getting conflicting messages about what they want the bench to be for a fight. And that's something that uh like we're actually going to be having a conversation with the team after the tier and talk about what our goals are for next year. I think that's a
Yeah.
very useful exercise. If like you as an individual need to make sure you understand what the goals of the team, the guild,
Yeah.
because otherwise you're going to get frustrated. Like if you're
On the
expecting the guild to be progression oriented and rankings oriented, and then they sub out like the top performers for people that are in some cases markedly worse performers,
Yep.
but they're friends and they're good people, and you want to like spend time with them because they're good people that you like hanging out with. That's going to frustrate someone that's looking for pure progression.
Right.
But on the other hand, someone that's just like looking to have fun raiding in World of Warcraft is going to get frustrated by not getting to raid as much with people that they like because you always bring the top performers. And maybe they're even one of the top performers, but people that they like maybe aren't.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I think that's another good point, is it, like, aligning your expectations with the guild, I think is another way to understand, like, why you're being sat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I think, from again, like, leaning on my personal sort of, experiences, right? Like, and I have this conversation sort of in Discord a lot in terms of like, when I was sad, I think we talked about this when I was sad for Ashtray. And I remember talking to somebody about this, like, oh, it's because Mistweavers are bad. And I was like, well, I mean, no, it's just that like I am not that much better than the other healers in my guild.
Yeah,
And like the other healers in my guild play a class that has something that counteracts a mechanic here very nicely. So it's like,
yeah,
it's not that as a class, I think we're bad. I think a Mistweaver could fit in, do that fight fine. It's just I'm not the most amazing player, right?
yeah,
Like I am not the best healer in my guild, and so like, or I'm not, heads and shoulders above everybody else in my guild from a healing perspective. So like, it doesn't make sense for me to sit, right?
yeah.
Like,
And like at the same time, we have players in our guild that I am confident they could come to me tomorrow and say, "I'm going to play this off meta class," and
yeah,
as long as it's not Survival Hunter, like we would probably let them because we're
right,
confident that even playing something that's like not meta, they can still execute. They can still play it at an exceptional level and continue to, be consistent and do mechanics. And then we have
yeah,
people that I'm like, you know, not comfortable with them bringing alts in because they might be very good at the spec that they play, but from history, having played with some of their alts, not always the best at picking up
not no,
something new and playing it. And sometimes it's just a matter of time. Like sometimes it's like someone's been playing the same character for years and they're good at that and
yeah,
don't have that same muscle memory on something else. And that's okay. It's just, different people are different.
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think to sort of maybe wrap this one up just a little bit, but I think the biggest thing is number one, like as a player being sat, like understand why and like look at the larger picture. Like look at the fact that like this is one fight for one tier. If you really enjoy playing with the people you're playing with and you want to continue doing it, like making a large deal out of sitting for one fight potentially hurts that moving forward.
Yeah.
And it's only a fight. Like you miss a week or two. If you're lucky, maybe it's even a night, right? And you get your kill later. Like
Yeah.
I want to kill bosses with my friends. Like that's
You,
what I
you
want to
know
do.
what no one
So
has ever said? You know what no one has ever said? Your
what's that?
CE doesn't count because you were out for birth.
Exactly. Yeah.
No one's ever said that.
No.
Like,
No.
it's completely ludicrous. Everybody knows. Like, if you run, I think it's pretty typical for a 20 player Mythic Raid team to run 24 to 26
Yep.
players on the roster. 4 to 6 people are not getting cutting edge on the first kill. That's just the weight. That's just straight math.
Yep.
And
Yep.
your CE is not worth any less because you got it a week or two later on the rekill.
No. You've progressed. I mean, you progress every boss. Like I said, if you're engaged, right? Even if you're out, right? If you're looking at logs, if you're helping strat stuff, if you're pointing stuff out,
Especially if you're
building
doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
building weak
absolutely.
auras, like you're just as much a part of that kill, and you're just as much as I mean, if even if you killed every other boss but the last boss, you're just as much of
Yep.
as a part of like your
We have one
guild
of our
getting there.
players that's out on Denathrius, and they posted a bunch of stuff in our Sire Denathrius strategy channel this
Yep.
weekend, and it's like that's great. That's
Yeah.
they are absolutely doing what they can to contribute, even though they're not in the race.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So they
that's
so
something I would say. If you're sad, look for things to do, and sometimes it is just being like, "There's nothing I can do to contribute on this. I am going to go and play something else while they kill the boss." And like
yeah.
sometimes that's all it is, but sometimes it's like looking at logs, looking at videos, figuring out what you can do to contribute to the raid, even if you're not in it. Very helpful.
Yeah. Exactly, exactly. So I think those are like the two big things. And then I guess the third one is probably more of a little bit more negative, but just more of a self-aware thing where like if you
Yeah.
are sat for every progression fight, right? And sort of only brought in at farm or only brought in because of, someone else not being there and like not because of you as a player, but just because like they couldn't fill the role with someone else. And that's a consistent thing. Like maybe look at a different guild, right? Or like look at maybe moving
Look at
on
your own
or
play. That's where I would
yeah,
start is figure out why.
yeah,
And not this is WoW, so not everybody has the best communication skills. So you may not be able to get a good answer from your raid leader. Like they might give you a different answer every day of the week, and
right.
that's unfortunate. But you can also the class discords are a great resource for this. If you go and ask people like, "Hey, I'm being sad a lot, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Can you like Wow, and
Yeah,
sometimes the answer is you're not doing anything wrong and you're being sat for other reasons that have nothing to do with you. And
right.
that sucks when that happens, but it is part of playing 24 to 26 people in a form of content that only allows 20.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a good point. Like, look inwardly first. Like, look at like what you're doing, and then if again, if you're not doing anything wrong, then it may be just the group you're with, or like ask why. Like, I think
That's
the
why.
biggest thing,
Number
like you
one,
mentioned,
like start there.
yeah, yeah, I think the biggest thing you mentioned too is like the communication side of things. Like as long as people understand they're being sat, like people hate to hear the oh, it's because you play melee or because you don't have an immunity. Like those are the terrible ways to say it. But I know that like in at least in my guild,
True.
after we killed Nazoth, like our raid leader basically gave a shout out like after the kill, we're all still hanging out, like to literally everyone who didn't have an immunity that was sat just because they didn't have an immunity. Because it was like, look, we wanted like this person in and this person in, but like they played Shadow Priest, so like they're screwed, right?
Yeah.
Um, and like so, I think that's the other thing is like even with this tier when we killed Sire, right? Like we talked about like some of our healers re-rolling and like some of the things happen. So like me rolling Holy Paladin was something that was brought up, right? Like one of our druids re-rolling Shaman was big. One of our shaman, one of our main shaman healers who was a DPS for every tier up to this one healing, right? Like I
Yeah.
think that's the other side of this being sat thing is like if you play with the team and they like understand all the aspect that goes into it, like it feels better. It feels like you killed the boss even if you didn't kill the boss.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so those are the
Yeah.
big things I think.
And yeah, I think that really covers it. And just the understanding if sometimes you ask your officers, like if they are always giving you non answers, that's a problem. But if you ask and sometimes it's just, we needed to have someone out on the fight and
Yeah.
got the short straw. He understands it.
Yeah, it just happens, dude.
So
It just happens.
again, 20 slots, 24 players. That's how math works.
Yeah.
Um,
Particularly if you're a healer.
yeah,
Particularly if you're a healer.
I am curious, kind of on the subject. So part of running a raid team is figuring out recruitment, right?
Yep.
Because you want to have like you don't want to recruit people that there's never a reason to bring into any fight ever. Like we're not going to recruit a one trick holy priest because they would never see play. We could have a
Yeah.
5 heal fight, and that's the only time that they would be brought in is for 5 healing. And even then, I actually think having one of our elemental shaman off heal resto would probably be better than having a dedicated or a holy priest. There's that. But like, what are your thoughts on different like numbers of players to have? So I think one that pops up a lot is having 4 healers on the roster versus having 5. Like people virtually always have 2 tanks, 4 to 5
Yep.
healers, and then the rest are DPS. Some
Yeah.
combination of melee and range.
Yeah, I mean, I think so right now we ended up with so I would say that 4 healers is the sweet spot with 2 like hybrids that can off heal. I
Yeah.
think is like where you'd want to be from a recruitment perspective. That's one of the to be fair, funny you asked this is one of the major changes we made in our recruitment moving forward at the end of this tier was that we don't recruit hybrids unless they can heal. Right? Like we don't
Really?
recruit unless they're willing to play their healing if they have one, right? So like
Okay.
if we need
Yeah.
a rogue, of course we're
Yeah. Yeah.
you
They
know,
they
we're
obviously
good,
can't
but
heal.
yeah, but if we're gonna recruit a druid like a boomkin or even a
You
feral,
want
right?
them to
Like
be
the
able to play
expectation is that
resto.
yeah, at least maybe not a main resto, but like at a
Yeah.
comparable level, right? Like a competitive level. And I think that's the biggest change because we ran into this issue where like we had me on Mistweaver, we had one Holy Paladin, we basically had one of each class. We had one Holy Paladin, one Disc Priest, we had a Resto Druid, and a Holy and me as a Mistweaver, right? Those were our 4 main healers. When Shaman got so good, we slotted in our Elemental Shaman as a Resto Shaman, which was great. But then we were left with like sort of a suboptimal comp. So I think moving forward, what we sort of change is that. Um, I think the other thing we're going to do in terms of recruitment, which is somewhat helpful, is having healers that can play 1 to 2 healers,
Yeah.
just to be helpful, at least in
That's
the healing
something that
meta. But
we did a little bit this tier, but we ended up having a fairly meta comp anyway, so it didn't end up really playing out that much.
mhm,
Because we started off, and some of it was also some of the grind, despite the lack of Azerite power, ended up being bigger at the beginning of the expansion than we expected.
yeah,
But the healers had been planning on like having a main and then an alt that they could bring into raid, and Only one I think we used is one person had a priest alt that we brought for a second GS on Kael'thas.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that actually I think worked out less well than we had hoped. On the other hand, we did have someone. We had an elemental shaman flex Resto multiple times this tier. They actually played Resto on our Stone Legion General skill,
That's awesome.
and they covered when one of our healers had to be out for like our Sludge Fist progression was during the Super Bowl. So we had a bunch of people out there, including a couple of healers. So we were really, really digging deep. But
Yeah.
they did really well on that, and then we had them heal on our Stone Legion General's kill, and like that's the kind of
Nice.
thing that I think actually can work very well if someone's interested in doing that.
Yeah, so that's sort of like where we can sit at like 24 to 26. I think that's the sweet. I think you're right. Sweet spot number wise is like 24 to 26. It gives you enough flexibility. But I think you're right. Like two tanks with one flex tank. I feel
Yeah,
like we always like
yeah,
to see a
definitely.
DPS that can flex the tank.
You don't
And
want to like
then
not be able to raid because nobody in your raid can tank, and one of your tanks in the hospital or
yeah, so it's out. Yeah,
out
for
for
an extended
whatever
period.
reason.
Yeah. So I think that's and then like yeah, from a healer perspective, four main healers with, a fifth or sixth healer that can swap in. And I think that's yeah, like I said, from a hybrid perspective, making sure your hybrids can play if they have a healing off spec. That
Yeah,
off spec I think is where we sit in terms of like what we're looking at.
I
So
think personally, I would say requiring it is probably fairly like strong in terms of like recruitment goals
yeah.
because it's one thing to say like we expect our DPS players to be able to play other DPS specs on their class, with the exception of like we don't expect Elemental Shaman to be able to play enhancement. There's generally just not a need for it, so we don't expect it.
Right.
But something like a rogue should be able to play all three specs. If
Yeah.
if you're an assassination one trick, better be getting like rank ones on every single thing,
Yeah.
because otherwise, when there's a fight that is better to play outlaw or sub, like you should be playing that at a competent level.
Oh yeah.
But then healing is a lot different from guessing, and like I definitely appreciate having flex healers on the roster, and we've got a couple, and they have been great. It's been very nice to have that, but it is. I'm trying to, and some of this is we're a weekend team, and so recruiting is already like I got an extra layer of difficulty because nobody wants to give up their Friday nights and their Sunday nights.
Yeah.
Um, that would make recruiting so much harder. Just require all our hybrids to be able to flex.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we'll see how it works out. Like I said, it was sort of something we made the change towards the like really at the end of the tier, right? So it's something I think we're gonna try as we recruit moving forward. Um, but yeah, I think that's it just we looking back at this tier, just like personally, like I think healing was probably our weakest part, right? Hurt us on a couple of fights. Like I think a Nerva took us way too long. And would have been helped by having a better healer in from a personal play perspective and then just a better comp. So yeah, but I think you're right. Like sweet spot 24, 26, two tanks with some flexes, four main healers, and then to be fair, having every hybrid flex probably isn't an issue, but having like one person that you can rely on to be that fifth
Yeah,
healer, I think is key.
I would say
Um,
at least one, ideally two, if you're running
yeah,
four healers. We ran five healers this tier, something that I think actually in hindsight was a mistake because it just wasn't a lot of requirement for running five healers. So it basically meant that one of those five healers was just out a lot more than average. Or it was worse because this priest, holy paladin. So the other three healers are competing for two spots, and
yep,
so one of them is out for basically like they are in for an average of like 2/3 of the bosses. Everyone is in for like, which is a way lower rate than melee. Melee is
yeah,
like you're in for like 85% of the bosses.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean that was I think that sort of sucks in terms of like healing, which is why I mean we have in the past as a guild run five healers, um, and essentially ran one healer of every spec,
Yeah,
right? Was our typical comp previous to Nyalotha, and it worked out okay, but I think now where we want to be as a guild is going to require us to make some changes there. But I think having four main is the
yeah,
key because you're generally going to flex up only one, and that's not a big deal to have somebody step in for a fight or two. I feel like this tier though had a lot more. I mean, we flexed down to 3 really only for a Nerva, right? And I mean,
It was very
Shriekwing was
consistently like 4 healing
4,
on
yeah, for the
almost
most
everything.
part.
The
The
only exception to that rule was Kael'thas. And I guess
Yeah,
Stone Legion General was 5 heals.
yeah. There was a fair amount if you think about it.
So
So
what? It
Stone Legion
was
was
Council,
Sludge
Stone
Fist.
Legion. I don't remember.
We 5 healed Sludge on progression.
I'm actually gonna look right now. I don't remember another one.
Yeah, other than Denathrius, like those 3, like 3 of the 4 final ones were all 5 healed for us at least. So
Yeah.
plus Kale, I guess, because Kale's right before we did Kale right before Council. So I think we 4 healed everything earlier
We
though.
did
Like
5 heal Sledgefish. So yeah, you're right. You know, Sire obviously 4 heal,
4.
but Sledgefist, Sire, Sledgefist, Stone Legion Generals. Kael'thas was 5 or 6 for us, and I think we did
Council.
5, but I played Prot Paladin, so kind of like
Yeah.
5.8.
Yeah. Yeah. So this year it was funny. There was a surprising amount of them. So having our
Yeah,
Resto Shaman or our Elemental Shaman be able to flex was cool. But yeah, I mean, I think 4 ends up being that sweet spot and run discs and totally paladins.
get yourself a good disc breeze.
Our
That
disc our disc was he's so angry about hitting Spirit Shell every minute. He played Holy on our clear last night and was like, I'm not playing disc for one of these fights. Don't expect it. So like Council was gonna be fun with like, we're not gonna have Spirit Shell for the
yeah.
fevers, which didn't matter, but it was
With the
funny.
nerf
So
to fevers, I don't think it's as big of a deal as it
no,
was. But it's real good,
no,
and
yeah.
I'm familiar with the complaints because our disc breeze is thinking about them too.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so that is, I guess that's sitting. I mean, I guess ultimately, it's have a positive attitude, understand it's for the greater good of the team, and, try and understand why you're being sat. And if it's because you're bad, fix it.
Good.
Yeah, fix it. So, I guess that's it.
But
So
yeah,
cool.
I
Oh,
just
sorry.
want to add one more thing to that. Just even if you just like when you disagree with the decision that's made maybe regarding the bench, try to figure out why. Because just disagreeing by
Yeah.
itself is not very productive. And sometimes it is, like I was talking about earlier, a disagreement over the direction of the team. And if you understand that, then it helps you contextualize what's going on. And maybe you're on the wrong team. Maybe the team's goals don't align with yours, or maybe it's like actually a mistake.
Yeah.
But try to figure out why.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing is like, if you can understand why, I think you'll feel better
Yeah.
about the decision, I think is the key thing. So cool. So I mean, that about wraps up the topic. I think we head into a quick Q&A is a little awkward this week because it's so early.
Yeah.
I didn't even ask for questions, but we did end up having one extra question that I didn't put in last week's episode that we sort of pulled across. And it's very much on point today because, of course, I have a story about this one. Um, not a story. It's just something I did say. Anyway, on to the question. Oh, well, sorry. This is, of course, the Q&A section. You can send your questions to Emallson or myself. We will answer them. Your questions don't have to be WoW related or even gaming related. We pretty much answer anything. I built a deck last year, so if you want to know some tips and tricks on that, I can give you some, woodworking
The
construction
biggest
tips.
tip is
Yeah, I should have done
just
that
get someone else to do it.
after digging the ninth footing. I definitely should have done that. So so in any event, short Q&A today, but we do have a good one. It is from our good friend Blazaroo, also known as Anzaru. Right? I said that right? Anzaru and Anzaru. Sorry, I'm fucking screwing myself up. They ask, Star Trek or Star Wars, and why? So I don't know, Emerson, if you wanna touch this
Okay, I have
subject.
opinions.
Okay.
So Star Trek and Star Wars shouldn't be compared.
Oh, okay.
All right. Right out the
Why is
gate.
that?
They're different things. They're fundamentally very different kinds of media. And I'm speaking specifically about the old Star Trek, not the new like Star Wars light Star Trek movies.
Okay.
And like some context, I've actually never seen most of the old Star Trek, but I am familiar with it. Okay. And there's a distinction between Star Wars in most of its forms just being kind of a popcorn, right? Like popcorn media where it's there to be fun and entertaining and good in its own right, but it's not there. They're not really, as a general rule, exploring any challenging concepts or anything politically charged, anything like that. It's very much just like at its core a summer black. That's what they are.
Okay.
Star Trek historically has had a lot more of the um, kind of classic sci-fi exploring possible futures and taking them to their conclusion. Things
Hmm.
like Earth in the Star Trek universe, like, is in the old ones portrayed as like this kind of utopia where there's like people have to work and it's just kind of nice. It's very different from like Star Wars having this kind of crapsack universe. Like I've been watching The Mandalorian recently,
Yeah.
and it's not to get on like don't go to TV tropes. You will life reading that website. But the kind of crapsack universe that is very common, but not really like talking, like it's not talking about anything. But a lot of older Star Trek actually does try and broach real subjects and think about things. And
Yeah.
that's not necessarily saying Star Trek is better or worse than Star Wars. It's just different. And so there it's just different. It's kind of like the difference between, I mean, I would say there is a fundamental difference if you look at a lot of classic sci-fi. Or here's so if you're familiar with sci-fi fiction from before the movie era, really, there's stuff that is actually focused on like a central question that they explore and like they take it to a conclusion. And that's kind of the thrust of it, is exploring some interesting concept and thinking about it and what are the implications of that. And
Hmm.
so a lot of
Yeah.
stuff like Isaac Asimov, was very well known for this. And like Asimov's got some misses. Let's be totally honest. He has some really dry books, really dull short are in. But he's also got a lot of very interesting work that was highly influential because it asked questions and try to actually answer them.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of pulp sci-fi, which generally is more of the Star Wars style, where it's not really asking a question, it's just a good ride.
Yeah.
And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just different. And so that's why I would say Star Trek and Star Wars and why it's been such a persistent thing is because they actually are just fundamentally different media. And it's also why so many Star Trek fans were so mad at the new Star Trek movies, which are genuinely, I would say, I haven't seen all of them. I saw the first one that came out. I would say it was genuinely a good blockbuster movie, but it's not that old classical sci-fi kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't have a good. That's a really good answer. I was just gonna be like, Star Wars is lightsabers and Star Trek doesn't, so
See?
Star Wars is better. Now, I understand what you're saying because like I have literally. So I will tell you that I have not seen, other than the new Star Trek movies, I've never fully watched like Star Trek through. So I've seen like episodes of Deep
Yeah.
Space Nine, episodes of The Next Generation, episodes of the original, the Shatner version, right? But never like sat through, watched them in
Yeah.
order, or like understood the underlying story. And I've seen the movies from back then. Like I saw, I think it's the third one, Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
Is that the third one?
Yeah.
So I've seen that one. I've actually seen that one not all the way through in one sitting, but I've seen all of it in
In
different
pieces.
sittings. Right. Like it's on
Truly the
FX.
best way
I'll
to
watch
watch a
part of
movie.
it and sort of go from there. But yeah, I mean, I think you actually are. It's a very good answer. In terms of like, I would agree that they're two very different things. Um,
Yeah.
but man, dude, Star Wars to me is just, I love Star Wars
Like
so much more.
I grew up on
So
Star Wars. I did not grow
yeah.
up on Star Trek. I have seen little bits of Star Trek here and there, and am mostly familiar with it actually by its influence on other media, which it has like a lot of a lot of media cribs pieces of Star Wars' like aesthetic and motives,
Hmm.
but they take ideas more so than individual motives from Star Trek. Like they take can't think of specific examples because I actually read it. Um, they take I some of the ideas that are maybe more subtle and not like, oh, that's obviously just like a lightsaber knockoff, or that's
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
obviously the Millennium Falcon, like the legally distinct Millennium Falcon kind of thing.
Yeah.
It shows up in a lot of like science fiction kind of property. Legally distinct TIE fighter.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. Although I did, so my story on this one is I went to the Lego store today,
Ooh,
and I actually bought the Star Destroyer
nice.
Lego, which is like the 3 foot long,
Yeah.
massive thing. So me and my children are gonna be putting that together over the next couple weeks. I'm
Nice.
excited. There's no such thing as a 3 foot long USS Enterprise made of Lego. Ergo, Star Wars is better.
That is a solid argument.
That's my answer. I'm sticking to it. I'm excited to
So
build Legos. Lego doesn't back Star Trek, man. Star Trek sucks. I don't, gosh, I think to be fair, your answer is actually probably one of the best answers I think we've ever given on this podcast about something. Uh, because it was thoughtful, I understood it, and I think it actually makes a lot of sense.
it's up there with
Um,
your F1 answer because I actually I
oh
gave you
yeah.
shit about it, but your F1 answer was good.
To drive, like, if you want to, so fun fact about F1, I know this isn't really the question, but we'll segue a little bit
Yeah.
into, if you actually want to get into F1. So there's two things I would suggest if you care. If you don't care, whatever. Two things I would suggest: listen to a podcast called Shift F1. And they do a preseason primer every year. It's an episode where they basically talk about everything about the sport, what makes it interesting, and then they talk about the teams. So you have a little bit of background. It's super cool. And then also the Netflix show Drive to Survive. Watch the latest season because like that gives you, like, it's a TV show, so it's much more drama based. So it's more
Yeah.
like the theatrics around the racing. But it also gives you a little bit of insight is that like it's not just like really crazy people driving very fast cars around in a circle. It's like these guys have personality. They're kind of assholes to each other.
Yeah.
It's like brother and sister fighting. It's funny. Like some of the stuff you hear is like, there's one driver who thought another driver cheated to get pole position. So when they came into the paddock and they basically when you win, you park in front of the number one sign. There's like a number two sign, number three sign. He jumped out of his car, took the number one side from in front of his competitor's car, put it in front of his, and kicked over the number two side. It was like, and then walked in, like didn't give an interview, or it might have been, it was either qualifying or the race, but yeah. Vettel did that one race, which is like the drama is also fun in F1. But anyway, sorry, Shift F1. If you want like to actually learn about it in a very structured approach, it's actually done by two guys who used to be on. I don't know. Why do you guys care about this? Anyway, if you've ever seen the face, if you ever seen the blonde haired guy with the blinky face, he's like, if you know the meme I'm talking about,
Hmm.
it's his name. The guy's name is Drew Scanlon. Drew Scanlon does that podcast. So fun
That's cool.
fact. Yeah. But anyway, Shift F1, cool, and then Drive to Survive. Anyway, sorry. So at Blazeroo, to answer your question, I think
Okay.
succinctly, Star Trek and Star Wars are two totally different things. Ergo, because Star Wars has Lego figurines and massive ones, it's better. But they're really two different things. So
Did you get the Lego Death Star?
no, so okay, so I'll tell you this little aside on this story. We
Okay.
walk into the store, and it's my daughter's birthday today. She's super into Legos,
Oh, so
which
it's
is awesome.
her Star Destroyer.
Yeah.
Stuff like
No,
that.
no. Well, no, no, no. So get this. So we walk in and the Legos have like this, they have this new set called, I don't know if it's new, but they have this Lego Friends line that's like, it's like for little kids. It's still
Yeah.
like real Lego, but it's like they do a mall and they have like this speedboat thing with a dance party on it. And anyway, she was enthralled with that. But then the other side of the store was all the Star Wars stuff.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so like I was like walking over and I was like, hey, like I said, like, hey, to my wife, I'm like, hey, do you mind if I just like, I just want to peruse? And she's
And
like, "No,
by
it's fine."
peruse, you mean
I'm like,
purchase.
"Maybe." So I'm like, "Oh, they have like the AT-AT walker from The Mandalorian in
Yeah.
like the season 1. They have a big AT, or that's
The
the
ATST.
ATS. Oh yeah, this little one. The AT-AT, they have a big AT-AT, which is one of the newer sets. It's like, "Oh, that's really cool." I'm like, "Oh." And then the store that I went to had a big Millennium Falcon, the massive Millennium Falcon display.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh man." I was like looking, I was like, "Oh, that looks real good." I was like, hmm. But then I look a little bit lower and I'm like, oh, they have the Star Destroyer. And I was like, I talked to him, I'm like, hey, do you have like how many people come and actually buy this thing? He's like, well, a lot of people come in and look at it, but nobody really buys it or whatever. I was like, have you ever put one together, seen one put together? He's like, no, but he's like, it looks really cool. I was like, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get this. So like, I'm like, just put this behind the counter when I pay and do it, it'll be fine. And then I was like, do you have any of the Millennium Falcon? And he was like, let me check because it didn't say like it didn't have any of the boxes out. Fortunately, they didn't have it. But then I go to pay. So like then I come back to like my daughter. So I just like put it behind the counter when we're ready, we'll all pay it together. And so like go back to like my family, like my daughter has now picked up the two sets she wants. Like my youngest now wants these other two little things. I'm like, cool, let's go. Let's pay. And the guy goes, do you still want it? And I was like, yeah. My wife is like, want what? And I was like, so I've been talking about this for a while. She's like, oh, she's like, is it she's like, okay. I was like, it's just the Star Destroyer. It's like another Lego thing. The girls and it'll be fun. It'll be like a family thing. She's like, okay, cool. And the first one, like, so she didn't ask anything about it. And then they bring out the box because she didn't notice it, I guess. And she's like, "Is that one Lego?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Just one. It's just one." She's like, "How big is this thing?" I was like, "I don't honestly, I don't know. It's not that big though." And the guy behind the counter threw me on the bus and he goes, "Oh, it's probably like what, 2.5, 3 feet long." She's like, "Justin, it's like, where are we gonna put this?" I was like, "It'll be okay. It'll
In
be
your
okay." And
office.
then
In your
yeah, in
office.
my somewhere in my office, I have to build a shelf. And then the best part is he like rings it like as he's ringing it up. I'm like, don't say the price out loud. I'll just pay it. And my wife was like, why? I was like, you don't like. Let's talk about this when we get to the car. Because it's like $650. Like it's not. It's or six. It's like $600 or something like that. So it's not a cheap Lego set. So that was my
I didn't even expect it to be that. Oh, okay, okay. I shouldn't broach this subject because this will be another hour long, another hour onto the episode. But like the transition of Lego from being like mostly just toys to being a lot of like collector's items with a few toys
it's
is
crazy.
not a trend that I'm a fan of. Like Magic the Gathering has gone that way too in a really
Yeah.
bad way, and it's a really big turnoff, and I hate to see it. But
Yeah. I mean, there is. So I will say in this, there are. I think that if you buy any themed set, so any or
yeah,
sorry, what am I trying to say? Any licensed set that is, to your point, it is a work of art. It is an art piece. You do not buy it to play with
well,
it.
like there's the really big ones. There's like the Millennium Falcons and the Death Stars and the AT-ATs,
Yeah.
and then there's like I remember having just a bunch of like random like swing a wing Lego sets as a kid
Yeah.
that were like $20.
Yeah, and so they kind of still have that, but they're like real tiny. Like even like this like the standard X-Wing set is like 50 or $60. So it is, I agree. It's definitely
Yeah,
more expensive, but they do have like the non-licensed product side of things
yeah,
where it's like their city sets or like these Lego friend sets. Like, dude, my daughter got this, we got through this massive boat thing. It's like has like a spinning dance party thing in the middle and like the
that's
cockpit
sick
flips
as hell.
up.
What the
There's a
heck?
slide at the back. Like it's actually really cool. It was like with all this moving stuff, it was probably like 50 or $60. So like
Yeah,
still slightly expensive, but at the end of the day, like there's a lot of it came with like 4 figurines. It's got a oh, it actually has a beach thing where it has like a store where you could quote unquote rent like beach equipment. It has a jet ski, and then it has like a flamingo float that people sit in. So something that gets pulled by the jet ski. So actually, to be fair, it came with a lot of stuff.
yeah.
Um,
No, that's a lot.
yeah, so I mean, like, in terms of, like, they're not that's what I'm saying is, like, if you buy a licensed product, you literally, like, just
Yeah,
it's double or maybe not double, but it's like a 25% markup just because it's got Star Wars stamped on it.
yeah.
And I think that stuff, like, I got the Mandalorian ship for Christmas, like, whatever it's called, his ship, so I have that built. So I bought the pirate ship that, like, transforms from, like, an island into a pirate ship for myself. That no one play well, my kids play with that one, and I feel really bad, and this is a huge tangent, but I feel bad because 'cause I'm, like, one of those people who are like, "They fucking broke the cannon doesn't go there, number 1. They just broke off this piece, his light post doesn't go there." All the like, I had meticulously placed all the little, like, the little bottles in, like,
Hmm.
certain areas. Like, there's the one drunk guy in the back that now has the girl hair on it and, like, is up front on top of, like, the thing, and I'm like, "They're just ruining it." Like, I'm getting very upset, but then I'm like this like, I feel bad because I'm like, generally Legos are made to be played with, so, like, they should be
Yeah.
doing this. But at the same time, I'm like, I spent literally 8 hours building this thing, and they are ruining it in 20 minutes.
Yep.
but but no, I mean, I agree. I think Lego, in certain cases, much more of an art piece than like just things the kids play with. Although they do have some stuff that you can play with. But yeah, if you buy like any of the Star Wars stuff, any of their big sets, it's like you just put it on a
Yeah.
shelf somewhere.
You bought a collectible. It's gonna go.
Yeah. Which I mean, it's a collectible I put together by reading. Oh, so fun fact, I pulled out I was like, man, this box is really heavy. It's just Lego. The actual instruction manual for this Star Destroyer is like a bounded book. It probably weighs like literally probably 5 or 6 pounds.
So
It's
you
like
got like a
no lie.
textbook. You
It's
bought
like
a
this thick.
textbook that came with a bunch of plastic.
Yeah. And it's got like, and in the front like 20 pages is like the story of how this came to be. Like it's like the head of Lego
So
design, like
it's very much like this is a collector's item.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually
I mean,
I'm
I guess
super impressed.
that is of course the case because it's a $600 Lego set, but
Yeah, which and so when I told my wife, she's like, "Is that what you're doing talking to the guy?" I was like, "Yeah." I was trying to buy the Millennium Falcon too, and she was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "It's only like $100 more." She's like, "Oh, so like $100 more like on top of the if you buy them together." I was like,
no,
"No,
no,
no, no,
no,
no,
no,
no,
no,
no,
no,
no."
no,
Like
no, no, no.
$600 for this one plus an extra $700 for the other one. So she was like, she's like, "You're ridiculous." I was like, "Mar," I was like, "But it's Lego. Like you." She's like, "This was supposed to be like." Then she got angry. She's like, "This was supposed to be Elizabeth's birthday." I was like, "I will make every one of her Legos first, as you know, maybe." I might actually start building it tonight, which is
You probably shouldn't.
no, no. It's best that it probably just sits upstairs and with all her stuff. But yeah, but that was my Lego story. I think it's fun. But yeah, Star Wars sucks. Or no, sorry, Star Trek sucks. I always mix it up. Jesus, yikes.
Uh,
Who cares? Just like what you like. I don't think one's better than the other.
yeah. I think they serve different purposes. Sometimes I just want to sit down after a long day and chill out and watch something fun.
Yeah.
And sometimes I am more interested in the story than that,
Yeah, which I mean, if you want to watch
or
something fun, I don't know
in the
why you're
ideas than that.
watching
Yeah.
the new Star Wars. That's for sure.
Which side note, I just finished The Mandalorian recently, and
Yeah, I would. I mean,
I'm looking
it's
forward to
funny.
the
The
next
TV
season.
shows are much better, and like the non like episode numbered movies, the new ones at least. Like Rogue One was really good. I thought
Rogue
Solo
One
was
was
pretty good.
amazing.
So
I am a
yeah,
huge sucker for any movie that kills everybody at the end, though. Like
yeah,
like I
yeah.
know they did
Agreed.
it so they wouldn't have any like loose plot threads from the original movies to have to worry about. But I am a huge sucker for any movie just like and then everyone dies.
Yeah,
Like
that's fair.
if it's got that at the end, I'm probably like I may it's not a guarantee that I will like it, but it definitely ups the odds.
Nice, nice, nice. Oh man. All right. I think
But we have
we've
reached
turned.
we've
I'm
reached the
sorry.
end of our show,
I think we have.
and this is not a show where everyone dies. So if you would like to support it and all of the other work that we do over on the Peak of Serenity, support people like Babylonius, who has managed to get monk buffs for the first time in a long time. Maybe, fingers crossed, we can we can get some Sweeper.
What's is that a class people play?
No, but it's a
Oh,
class they
okay.
want to play.
That's true. I do. I do want to play my Mistweaver.
But if you would like to support us and all the work that we do over at the Peak of Serenity, you can do that over on our Patreon at patreon.com/Peak of Serenity. And not only does that support the site and the podcast, that also gets you a neat little role in Discord and some private channels, and you can come and hang out, which we always appreciate. But thank you all for listening. Apologies for the weird timing of this episode,
It's true.
and we will see you next week.
Bye.